going to, he turned to the whole group and looked at them, and he said, but what I am going to do, he said, I'm dismissing this man's case, but he said, I'm going to fine the rest of y'all 50 cents apiece. And this was in the old days, and they're all looking around like, you know, what is he charging me 50 cents for? And he said, the reason I'm putting this on y'all, he said, because there shouldn't be a person in our community that has gotten to the place that they have to steal to put some bread on the table when all of y'all got a jingle or got money in your pocket. And, you know, that, in a sense, was justice. You know, that judge at that point was acting in a just manner. And then where it moves on and it talks about mercy, you can look up a definition of that mercy, and it's kindness in excess of what may be expected or demanded by fairness. In other words, maybe I don't owe it to you, or you don't owe it to me. And going back to that other definition, it says that mercy is not getting what we deserve. In other words, hey, we all deserve death and hell, and you know that we deserve what Jesus got, but He took it for us. He showed us mercy. You know, mercy was shown upon us. So mercy is not getting what we deserve. In other words, giving us more than a break, but something bigger than a break. It's kindness in excess of what may be expected or demanded by fairness. And then we move to that third one, and it says, and to walk humbly with your God. You know, the Scripture tells us that God, what does He do? He opposes the proud, but He draws near to the humble. When we humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God, it says in due time He will raise us up. He will lift us up if we humble ourselves. But if we walk around and, you know, we're expecting everybody to bow to us or to be at our beckoning call or our demands or whatever, you know, we're arrogant and high-minded and heady. And the Scripture talks about that when it goes, He says that He will draw near to those that are humble. And I heard of another, and this is no offense to, well, the war's been over for a long time, but a long time, thank God, but that particular war. But during the war between the states, the Civil War, there was a story told about Robert E. Lee, the General Robert E. Lee, and how, you know, that man didn't want to go to war. You know, the men that had any really military training that knew, the majority of them didn't want a battle, especially killing their own kind, killing their own countrymen, so to speak. But our country was divided on issues and divided by borders and states at that time. And it said that there was Confederate troops that were boarding a train to get from one place to another. And the troops just piled onto that car, that train car, and they all sat down. And it said there was a woman came in with a baby in her arms, and she was standing. And General Lee, they had him in the back of the car because, you know, that was the safest place for him, was in the back seat. And as that woman walked down the aisle looking back and forth, had that baby in her arm, not one of those soldiers got up and offered the place. And when they got back there to the general, some of them were kind of glancing back. He rose, took his hat off, and gave her his place. And by then it was, no, here, General, you take my place. General, you take my place. And it was said that Robert E. Lee said, if you don't have room for that woman and child to sit down, then don't give me a place. You know, and that's humility. I mean, here he is. He's the highest guy. And there's false grace. You know, I heard of another story that, you know, there's real grace and there's real mercy. And all of those run together. Like here, grace is getting what we do not deserve. In other words, God gives us His grace. And without grace, we're not getting anywhere. The songwriter that wrote Amazing Grace, he realized amazing grace. How amazing it is that He would save, you know, us, a wretch like me. He would save us. That is amazing. Some people think that they can make it in this world on their own fortitude. And it's just like a fellow that was going to cross the ocean in a sailing ship, and he didn't need any help, he thought. got out in the ocean grew calm. There wasn't any wind. So he was stuck. Didn't have a paddle because he was dependent on that wind. So he started kind of trying to rock the boat around a little bit and started pulling on the mast a little, trying to make something happen. And he saw a few ripples in the water and he thought, well, hey, I'm gaining something. But then he realized when it got right down to it, he wasn't going anywhere. Just like we use that term, we're spinning our wheels, he was sitting still. You know, and that's a false grace. That's like our own grace, our own strength or fortitude. We got to have it, but it's not going to complete the journey for us. It's not going to get us to that home that we want to be when it all is summed up. It's going to take His grace. And His grace, Paul said, is sufficient. You know, it's sufficient now. It'll be sufficient then. There's humbly, if you talk about humility, is conscientious of one's shortcomings. There was a story told about two brothers that were farmers and had inherited a farm. And I wrote part of it down here. I wouldn't forget it. But one of them thought he was too good for the farm, and he wanted his brother to give him the part that was owed him, and he did so. But that brother went on, and he went to the big city and made a name for himself in business. And then the one brother did what he wanted to. He stayed right there on that farm. And he worked that farm and was pleased with life and was happy with his labor and was, you know, right where he ought to be. And there was a death in the family. One of the relatives had died. So the brother that had gone to the city and made such a big name, everybody knew his name, he was a household name, came back for that funeral. And then they went back out to the old home place after the services. And he was talking to his brother, and I wrote it down here. He says, why don't you, the one brother asked the other, he says, why don't you go out and make a name for yourself so you can hold your head up high? In other words, like what he was doing, and here we are, you know, we set a day aside in America, Canada, Puerto Rico, to honor the laborer as well as the labor. It's a proud thing to be able to work. You know what? And when I was a freshman in high school, our ag teacher told us one time, I mean, he was kind of down on our generation a little bit. Man, if you worked, you was his big buddy, you know, and he liked the ones that would work. But some of them didn't care about work. Just like I guess it's been in every generation. Because the scripture, they had to tell them, Paul had to tell them, that said if they don't work, they don't eat. You know, that's getting pretty plain. And so I guess it's not just that or other generation. It's been all through. There's been lazy folks. But one day, Mr. Powers was so worked up, our school teacher was so worked up, the ag building was across the highway like Bill Senior's house is. It was about that distance from the high school. We was over there, and he said, all right, what's going on in the big house today? He acted like we was in a little world on our own. And he always talked politics to us. You know, we liked it because then we didn't have to study. You know, we liked to listen to him rant and rave for 2 hours. It was supposed to be advanced ag, but we got to hear his philosophy on everything. Some of it was pretty good, though. But he said, I want y'all to do something for me. He said, I want you, when you go back over there to the school, he said, I want you to get out some kind of magic marker or a pen. He said, I want you to go in them bathrooms, every one of you can find. And he said, I want you to write the dirtiest 4-letter word you can find on the bathroom wall. He said, would you do it for him? And we're all just thinking, boy, he's flipped out this time. You know, he's gone crazy. And then he says, let me spell it for you. He said, it's W-O-R-K. Like that. And, you know, but, you know, getting back to that story where the man said, well, why don't you get out and make a name for yourself so you can hold your head up high. So the brother, he looked out among the field, and he says, he was looking at the wheat, and he said this right here, he said, only empty heads stand up. He says, those that are filled are always bowed low. You think about that for a minute. That man that's so arrogant, that's so proud, that's so above everybody else, He's the one that's going to be like this here.